One of the things that I find really irritating and simultaneously compelling and attractive is when phrases like outside of time are used. And I came across this most recently with Francis Collins, I guess the biologist who's in charge of the Human Genome Project for a long time, and also a theologian and Christian. No, he's not really a theologian, he's just a believing Christian, actually, that's more accurate. But in one of the talks that I read, which is based on one of his books, called something like, The Argument for God? No, I can't remember the title of his book. But he gave a talk on it, and he used this phrase a couple of times about God being outside of space and time. So that's the most recent incarnation of that kind of phrase I've heard. But I've heard others before, that God or spirituality or some kind of idea to do with that is beyond space. And you sometimes see it in purely temporal terms as well, where God existed before the creation of the universe and effectively created time, and to do so he must have existed before time. So you have this idea of before time. And even in the refutation of that, which I think was Hume probably, if God existed before time, then the implication is that something existed before God, and you get this kind of infinite regress. And you also get it in kind of pop versions of cosmology, when people ask, what was around before the black hole? I beg your pardon, what was around before the black hole? What was around before the Big Bang? It's a nonsense question. What was around before the Big Bang? It's a little bit about, excuse me. It's a bit like saying, what's further north than the North Pole? It's that kind of a question, but I just find it very irritating, but as I say, at the same time, intriguing or affecting in some way. So the reason why I think it's irritating is because it's oxymoronic, I think. I think as soon as you say something is outside of space or beyond space, it's self-contradictory. I mean, I'm kind of imagining, it assumes that space is like a box. It's a Newtonian version of space for a starter, because outside draws on metaphors of containers, or just draws upon the literal logic of containers. So if you're saying something is outside of something, you're imagining a container, let's call it space, and then you're imagining something outside of space. So you get a marble, you put it in the matchbox, there it is, it's in space, and then you take the marble out of space, out of the matchbox. And that's why we're supposed to think of God. It's like a marble that's not in the matchbox. But that's pointless. You can just say, well, make a bigger matchbox, just to expand space. Why would the marble outside of the matchbox not be in space? You just make a bigger space. Or increase the number of dimensions if you want. Put them in a fourth or a fifth dimension. It's a physics question. Or it prompts a series of questions in physics and to do with the structure of space, really. But I know if you probe that, and I've seen this talked about before, I know if you probe that, then it always comes down to, yes, but God is, it's not human. These things that we call space and time are human concepts. And God doesn't exist in those kind of concepts. Even this imaginary human constructions of greater numbers of dimensions than the three we habitually walk around in. Those are human constructions, the answer is. And that might be true, I don't know. I mean, I know Kant said something like that. I'm absolutely fine with that. But if you're saying that, then you can't simultaneously say that God is outside of that. It's like saying, here's the marble in the matchbox, but God isn't in the matchbox. He's not in space, he's outside of space. So you take the marble out of the matchbox, and then you say, but the matchbox doesn't exist. So God is outside of a non-existent matchbox. It doesn't make any sense. It's circular logic. You rely on one piece of logical architecture, the logical architecture of space, to provide the concept of outsideness. And then you take away the concept of space, so it becomes meaningless. Kind of. And the same thing happens with before time. You if you put God, or anything actually, before the Big Bang, anything before time, then you're using a temporal idea. Before is a temporal notion. It absolutely depends upon existence as time to have any sense at all. So you put it before, you've just lost the meaning completely. So that's one of my irritations right now, really, that use of outside. If you're saying that God is outside of space, then you better back it up with some physics. And if you're saying space is an illusion, then you've just relinquished any right to use terms like outside of, beyond, above, beneath, any of those kind of spatializing metaphors. Having said all that, and I'm not going back on it in any way, it is captivating. I think there is something very attractive about those terms. For the same reason, I think that phrases like that name of that film, The Land Before Time, is quite captivating, or The Land That Time Forgot. There's something about the circularity of that, which keeps kind of, when I think about it, I don't think about it too hard, which when I just allow it to play itself out in my mind, it has this weird circularity, which is a logical problem, but a kind of interesting poetic effect. It kind of keeps folding back on itself. You know, the paradox keeps folding back and persisting, a bit like a feedback loop. Persists. It has that kind of effect. In the same way that things like the Cretan paradox does the same thing. You know, about the guy in Crete who stood up in the assembly and said all Cretans are liars. Of course, if he's a liar, then the thing he's saying is a lie, which means that all Cretans aren't liars, which means that he's telling the truth. But he's telling the truth, then all Cretans are liars, which means that the thing he is saying is a lie, and all Cretans tell the truth. And so it goes on and on. It just puts you into this perpetual syndronating feedback loop, which is irritating, but also quite attractive and exciting. What it reminds me of, and this is really tangential, every morning when I'm walking my dogs, I haven't got this on video, I walk past this electricity substation. And it's quite, they're not very attractive things, but this is quite an attractive one. It's surrounded by this large gravel patch. So it looks a little bit like a Zen garden with a big transformer stuck in the middle of it. And it makes this weird humming noise. They all do that, I know. I don't know why they hum, but they do. And there's something about that hum which is attractive to me. For the same reason, I think, that things like the Cretan paradox, or the things like this nonsensical phrase of anything, God or anything else, being outside of space and time is attractive. It feels like something, it just feels like something is circulating and humming, and it has that kind of autopoetic liveliness to it, even though it's just the sounds of a transformer or the hum of a nonsense phrase. Why do dogs eat grass? I don't have my dog eating grass.